The rain pounded against Emma Reed's windshield like angry fists as she squinted through the blurry glass, desperately trying to make out street signs. Her ancient Honda sputtered in protest at the flooded streets, the wipers barely keeping up with the downpour that had turned Chicago into a watery nightmare. 3 missed calls from her landlord glared from her cracked phone screen, each one a reminder of the rent she couldn't pay with her waitressing tips. She'd taken the double shift tonight, hoping to make enough for at least half the payment, but the storm had scared away all but the most determined customers. The GPS rerouted her through an unfamiliar industrial district, where streetlights were more suggestion than illumination. Shadows loomed between abandoned warehouses, the kind of place where even police cruisers rarely ventured after dark. Emma slammed on her brakes as a sleek black silhouette materialized from nowhere. A luxury car stopped at an odd angle across the narrow street. Her tires lost traction on the slick asphalt, sending her Honda into an uncontrollable slide directly toward the vehicle. The sickening crunch of metal against metal echoed through the empty street, followed by a heartbeat of terrible silence. Emma's hands shook as she pushed herself away from the deployed airbag, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip during impact. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she watched in horror as the driver's door of the black Jaguar swung open. A tall figure emerged, his expensive suit seemingly impervious to the downpour as he approached her crumpled Honda with deliberate, unhurried steps. Light from a nearby street lamp caught his features. Sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes that seemed almost golden in the dim glow, and an expression that made Emma's blood turn to ice in her veins. This was not a man accustomed to inconvenience or patience. "I'm so sorry," Emma stammered as she fumbled with her door handle, finally pushing it open against the protest of bent metal. "I couldn't stop. The rain. I'll pay for everything, I swear." He said nothing as his gaze traveled from her trembling form to the considerable damage where her car had plowed into the Jaguar's passenger side. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain on metal and concrete. Behind him, 2 other men emerged from the shadows, their stances and vigilant eyes marking them as something far more dangerous than business associates. One touched his ear, murmuring into what was clearly a communication device, while the other kept his hand suspiciously close to his jacket. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice nearly lost in the storm. "I don't have insurance, but I'll work it off somehow. I can't afford—" She stopped, as the man raised his hand in a gesture that commanded instant silence. "Nathan Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent that sent shivers down her spine. "Remember that name, because from this moment on, your life belongs to me." Emma awoke in a room that couldn't possibly be real, a space larger than her entire apartment, with silk sheets beneath her and sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her head throbbed with each heartbeat, memories of the accident floating back in fragments like debris after a storm. She bolted upright, panic seizing her chest as unfamiliar surroundings came into focus. Antique furniture, crystal chandelier, and a wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than someone's bedroom. This wasn't a hospital. This was something far more dangerous. The door opened silently, revealing Nathan Blackwood in a perfectly tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. In daylight, he looked even more intimidating, cold calculation in his eyes as he studied her like a scientist might examine a particularly interesting specimen. "Your car is totaled," he said without preamble, walking to the windows where he drew back heavy curtains to reveal a stunning view of Chicago's skyline from what must have been at least 30 floors up. "Mine will require extensive repairs, custom parts that aren't easily obtained." Emma clutched the silk sheets tighter, suddenly aware she was wearing clothes that weren't hers, soft pajamas that felt more expensive than anything she'd ever owned. "Where am I? Why didn't you just call the police or take me to a hospital?" A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Police reports are public records. I prefer to handle my affairs privately, especially when they involve someone as intriguing as you." He moved closer, each step deliberate as a predator stalking prey. "You owe me $127,000 for the damage to my vehicle. By my calculations, at your current income, it would take approximately 9 years to repay, assuming you lived on nothing but air and goodwill." "That's impossible," Emma whispered, the blood draining from her face as the number echoed in her head. "I can't. There's no way I could ever pay that much." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. "I'm offering you an alternative. Work for me, live here, and I'll consider your debt paid in 1 year. His eyes never left hers as he laid out her future like cards on a table. You'll attend social functions as my companion, manage certain aspects of my household, and in return, you'll want for nothing: clothes, food, protection. All I ask is your complete loyalty and discretion. Emma's mind raced through scenarios, each ending worse than the last. Running wasn't an option. He clearly had resources beyond imagination. Fighting would be futile against a man who commanded armed guards and lived in a penthouse fortress. And if I refuse? She asked, already knowing the answer from the predatory satisfaction that flickered in his golden eyes. Then I'll pursue every legal avenue to collect my debt. Your wages garnished, your credit destroyed, your future opportunities limited. His voice remained conversational, as though discussing the weather rather than systematically dismantling her life. 1 week into her new life, Emma learned that Nathan Blackwood wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that made the most influential businessmen in Chicago tremble. The whispers among the staff revealed fragments of truth. His family controlled shipping routes, real estate, and industries that operated in the shadows of legality. Each morning began with Jackson, Nathan's stern-faced head of security, delivering a schedule of her day's responsibilities. The former military man made no effort to hide his distrust, his eyes following her every movement, as if expecting her to steal or sabotage something in the penthouse. "You don't belong here," he warned her on the 3rd day, cornering her in the hallway with cold precision. "The boss has his peculiarities, but bringing in strays has never been one of them until you." The rules became clear through painful trial and error. Never enter Nathan's office without permission. Never speak unless spoken to during business meetings. Never ask about the men who arrived at odd hours with unmarked packages and tense expressions. Each transgression earned her a cold stare that made her blood freeze. She discovered the extent of Nathan's surveillance when she attempted to use his private phone to call her former roommate. Within minutes, Jackson appeared as if materialized from thin air, silently confiscating the device and escorting her back to her gilded prison cell of a bedroom. At night, Emma would stand at her window, 30 stories above the city streets, calculating the impossibility of escape from this fortress in the sky. The door to her suite remained unlocked, a psychological trap more effective than any deadbolt or chain could ever be. Nathan himself remained an enigma, appearing and disappearing without warning, his moods shifting like weather patterns, sometimes almost cordial, sharing meals with her in companionable silence, other times distant and cold, when business calls interrupted their routine. Only his intense gaze remained constant, following her movements with predatory focus. She was required to attend meetings with his business associates, playing the role of decorative companion while absorbing fragments of conversation about territories, shipments, and competitors who had mysteriously relocated. The implications made her stomach churn with dread and unwanted knowledge. On the 10th night, the penthouse erupted with activity. When a bloodied man was carried into Nathan's private study, Emma caught a glimpse of medical equipment being rushed in before Jackson firmly closed her door, but the muffled sounds of pain and urgent voices haunted her until dawn. "You're beginning to understand now, aren't you?" Nathan asked the next morning, studying her face as she pushed breakfast around her plate. "This isn't a game, and I'm not simply an eccentric businessman with boundary issues." The first time Nathan took her to a formal event, he draped her in diamonds worth more than everything she'd ever owned and whispered in her ear, "Remember who you belong to tonight. Every man in that room would kill to take what's mine." It wasn't until she overheard an argument between Nathan and someone called the Commissioner that Emma fully comprehended the web she'd become entangled in, a criminal empire that reached into every corner of Chicago, with Nathan Blackwood as its ruthless, calculating heart. The first crack in Nathan's perfect facade appeared exactly 17 days into Emma's captivity, when he returned from a business meeting with knuckles bruised and eyes haunted by something that looked almost like regret. Without explanation, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to her, and simply said, "Today was necessary but unpleasant." Snow fell outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, blanketing Chicago in pristine white that would soon turn gray with city grime. Emma found herself oddly comfortable in the silence between them, a strange intimacy and shared solitude as they watched the transformation of the urban landscape below. The next morning, Nathan informed her they would be visiting a property outside the city. No further explanation offered as his driver navigated through neighborhoods that grew progressively more run down. When they stopped before a brightly painted building with a playground, Emma's confusion only deepened. Children's laughter spilled from the doors of what appeared to be a community center, their faces lighting up when they spotted Nathan's imposing figure. To her astonishment, his cold mask melted away, as a small girl with braids launched herself into his arms with complete trust and affection. "Mr. B funds everything here," whispered a woman who introduced herself as the center's director. "Without him, these kids would have nowhere to go after school, no meals, no tutoring. Most of them come from homes where survival takes priority over education." Emma watched in stunned silence as Nathan helped a young boy with multiplication tables, his patience seemingly endless as the child struggled with concepts that wouldn't come easily. This was a different man than the one who ruled his criminal empire with calculated precision and merciless efficiency. Later, as they toured the facility, the director explained how an anonymous benefactor had purchased the building 5 years ago, when developers threatened to demolish it for luxury condos. Emma didn't need to ask who that benefactor was. The answer was clear in the children's familiarity with Nathan. "My father believed charity was weakness," Nathan said quietly, as they drove back to the penthouse, his eyes fixed on the passing cityscape rather than meeting her questioning gaze. "He taught me that compassion had no place in our world." The unspoken implication hung between them, that Nathan had chosen to defy this teaching in his own careful, guarded way. For the first time, Emma saw the outline of a human being beneath the monster she'd been living with, complicated and contradictory. That night, Jackson delivered a thick folder to her room, documents about the community center's operations, financial statements, program descriptions, and a handwritten note from Nathan. "Your degree in social work. Make it better." It wasn't a request, but a command wrapped in unexpected opportunity. Emma spent days poring over the center's programs, identifying gaps in services and creating proposals for improvements. When she finally presented her ideas to Nathan, his golden eyes studied her with an intensity that made her heart race for reasons she wasn't ready to examine. "Impressive," was all he said, but the approval in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through her chest, a dangerous feeling for someone who should be plotting escape rather than seeking validation from her captor. The first warning came in the form of a black envelope delivered directly to Nathan's private elevator, a breach of security that sent Jackson into a controlled fury of background checks and interrogations. Emma watched from the periphery as Nathan opened the message, his face revealing nothing while his body tensed like a coiled spring. That night, the penthouse transformed into a war room. Men in expensive suits with hard eyes gathered around Nathan as he issued orders, in a voice too low for Emma to overhear from her position by the windows. Only fragments reached her. "West Side warehouses. Double the guards. Informant in our ranks." The atmosphere in the penthouse changed overnight. Additional security personnel appeared at every entrance. Emma's movements became more restricted, and Nathan's rare moments of almost warmth vanished beneath layers of cold calculation and barely controlled rage. Something was unraveling in his carefully constructed world. "The Riveras are making a play for our territory," Jackson explained curtly, when Emma found him checking the penthouse's security systems for the 3rd time that day. "They think the boss has grown soft because of you, a distraction that makes him vulnerable." Emma's blood ran cold at the implication that her presence had somehow weakened Nathan in the eyes of his enemies, that she had become leverage in a game where the stakes were measured in blood and territory rather than dollars and cents. The weight of unintended consequences settled on her shoulders like concrete. She wasn't prepared for the sound of gunfire that woke her in the dead of night, distant at first, then alarmingly close as shouted commands echoed through the penthouse corridors. Emma froze in terror as her bedroom door burst open, revealing not Nathan or Jackson, but a stranger with cold eyes and a gun pointed at her head. "Get up," the man ordered, his accent thick with Eastern European consonants. "You're coming with me now. The boss wants to send Blackwood a message he won't forget." Before Emma could scream, the window behind her attacker exploded inward, spraying glass like deadly confetti across the room. Jackson appeared through the shattered opening, his movement so swift and lethal that Emma barely registered what happened, until her would-be kidnapper lay motionless on the floor. "We need to move you," Jackson barked, already pulling her toward the door with an urgency that made her stumble. "The building's compromised. Rivera's men are on 3 floors and the roof. Nathan's orders are to get you to the safe house immediately." The journey through the penthouse became a nightmare of smoke and shadows, as Jackson guided her through service corridors she hadn't known existed. Twice they froze as armed figures passed nearby, and once Jackson silently eliminated a man who turned the wrong corner at the wrong moment. They reached the underground garage only to find Nathan surrounded by 3 attackers, his normally immaculate suit torn and bloody as he fought with the calculated precision of someone trained in violence since childhood. The cold efficiency of his movements should have terrified Emma, but instead, she felt a surge of something dangerously close to admiration. The moment Nathan saw her, something shifted in his expression, relief quickly replaced by horror as he shouted, "Behind you!" Emma turned just as Jackson shoved her roughly aside, taking the bullet meant for her with a grunt of pain that seemed impossibly small for such a devastating wound. The world narrowed to chaotic fragments, Jackson collapsing against her, Nathan's roar of fury, the deafening echo of gunfire in the concrete garage, and then Nathan's arms around her, pulling her toward a waiting car as bullets sparked against metal nearby. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice raw with an emotion she couldn't name. The safe house was a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, its ordinary exterior concealing reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, and a security system that would make government agencies envious. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking as Nathan's personal doctor extracted the bullet from Jackson's shoulder. "Will he survive?" she whispered, watching the normally intimidating security chief look suddenly vulnerable on the makeshift operating table. The doctor's grim nod offered little comfort as he worked with practiced efficiency that spoke of too much experience with gunshot wounds. Nathan paced the room like a caged predator, phone pressed to his ear as he issued commands in a voice that promised retribution against those who had dared invade his territory. Blood stained his shirt, some his, some belonging to men who would never breathe again. "Rivera thinks he can take what's mine," Nathan growled after ending his call, his golden eyes finding Emma's across the room with an intensity that made her breath catch. "He believes you're my weakness, that threatening you will make me surrender territory my family has controlled for generations." Dawn broke over Chicago as Nathan's remaining lieutenants arrived at the safe house, their faces grim with news of casualties and compromised locations. Emma listened from the kitchen doorway as they detailed the coordinated attack that had targeted not just the penthouse, but 3 warehouses and a restaurant known to be under Blackwood protection. "We have a traitor," concluded a silver-haired man whose accent marked him as Eastern European. "Someone gave Rivera the access codes, the patrol schedules, everything they needed to hit us simultaneously." Nathan's expression hardened into something terrifying as he pulled up security footage on a laptop, scanning through clips with laser focus until he froze on an image that made the room fall silent. There, entering the service elevator hours before the attack, was David Chen, Nathan's financial advisor and trusted Inner Circle member for the past decade. "Find him," Nathan ordered, his voice deadly calm in a way that made Emma's blood run cold. "Bring him to me alive. I want to look in his eyes when I ask him why." While the men dispersed to hunt for the betrayer, Nathan led Emma to a secure room on the 2nd floor, his hand protective on the small of her back. "You'll stay here until this is finished. Rivera won't stop until he has you or until he's dead." "Why me?" Emma asked, finally finding her voice as Nathan checked the room's security features. "I'm nothing to you. Just a random woman who crashed into your car. Why would Rivera think I matter enough to be leverage?" Nathan paused, his back to her as he seemed to consider his words carefully. When he finally turned, something in his expression had changed, the cold mask slipping to reveal a glimpse of vulnerability that seemed foreign on his features. "Because he saw what I've been trying to deny since the night you stood in the rain, refusing to beg even when faced with impossible odds," Nathan answered, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. "You aren't nothing to me, Emma. You never were." His confession hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing at once. Emma struggled to reconcile the man before her, capable of both tenderness and terrible violence, with the simplistic monster she had first believed him to be. 3 days passed in the safe house, a strange limbo where Emma found herself gravitating toward Nathan, despite every logical reason to fear him. Jackson recovered enough to resume command of security, his watchful eyes noting the shifting dynamic between captive and captor, with silent concern. Rivera's men found Chen trying to board a flight to Singapore, Nathan informed her on the 4th morning, sliding a tablet across the breakfast table with images of police cordoning off an area near Lake Michigan. "The official report will call it a mugging gone wrong." Emma should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual reference to murder, but instead found herself asking, "Did he say why he betrayed you?" The question emerged naturally, as though she had become accustomed to this world of shadow loyalties and bloody consequences. Nathan studied her face with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath her carefully constructed defenses. Money, initially. Fear, eventually. Rivera convinced him that I'd grown weak because of my preoccupation with you. And have you? Emma challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. Become weak because of me? Everyone seems to think I'm your vulnerability, the chink in your armor that will bring down your empire. A smile ghosted across Nathan's lips. Not the cold, calculating expression she'd first encountered, but something genuine that transformed his features. They misunderstand. What they see as weakness, I recognize as strength I never possessed before. That night, Rivera made his final move, not against the safe house, but against the community center, setting fire to the building while children were inside for an evening program. Nathan received the call as he and Emma were reviewing security footage, his face draining of color as he listened to the frantic report. He targeted the children, Nathan said after hanging up, rage and anguish warring in his expression. To draw me out, to prove I care about something other than power and territory. Emma didn't hesitate, already moving toward the door with determination that matched his own. Then we go. Now. Those children are innocent and they're in danger because of us. The journey to the burning community center passed in a blur of sirens and tension, Nathan's security detail forming a protective perimeter around them as they arrived at a scene of chaos, firefighters battling the blaze while terrified parents searched for their children among those already evacuated. 8 children still unaccounted for, reported the center's director, her face streaked with soot and tears. They were in the back classroom when the fire started blocking the main exit. Nathan moved before anyone could stop him, shrugging off his suit jacket and pushing past firefighters toward a side entrance not yet consumed by flames. Emma watched in horror as he disappeared into the inferno, her heart constricting with a fear she hadn't expected to feel for the man who had once been her captor. Minutes stretched like hours until Nathan emerged from the smoke, carrying 2 children while guiding 6 more behind him, all of them coughing but alive. As paramedics rushed to attend to them, Emma caught sight of a figure on a nearby rooftop, a man with a rifle trained directly at Nathan's unprotected back. "Nathan!" she screamed, already running toward him without thought for her own safety. The shot rang out just as she collided with his body, the impact sending them both to the ground as pain exploded across her shoulder, hot, sharp, and overwhelming. The last thing Emma saw before darkness claimed her was Nathan's face, twisted with a fear more profound than any emotion she'd witnessed from him before, his lips forming words she couldn't hear as chaos erupted around them. Emma woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the warm pressure of a hand holding hers. Nathan sat beside her bed, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled by what appeared to be days without proper rest, his golden eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that spoke of sleepless vigils. "The children?" she asked, her voice a raspy whisper that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. Relief flooded Nathan's expression as he reached for a cup of water, gently helping her drink while supporting her head. "All safe, thanks to you," he answered, setting the cup aside without releasing her hand. "The bullet was meant for me, Rivera's final, desperate attempt after I dismantled his organization piece by piece while you were unconscious. 3 days she had been drifting in darkness," Nathan explained, during which time Chicago's criminal landscape had been permanently altered. Rivera was gone, not killed but ruined, his territory seized, his allies turned, his financial assets frozen through channels both legal and otherwise. "I had a lot of time to think while watching you fight for your life," Nathan continued, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand, "about what kind of man I've become, what kind of life I've built on the foundation my father left me." Outside her private room, Emma could see Jackson standing guard, his arm still in a sling, but his presence as vigilant as ever. What surprised her was the collection of handmade cards taped to her door, bright, colorful messages from the children at the community center, tokens of gratitude and concern. "I can't change the past," Nathan said, his voice dropping to a confession meant only for her. "My hands will never be clean, and my empire wasn't built on good intentions. But the future, our future, could be different." He produced a small key from his pocket, placing it in her palm with careful deliberation. "This opens the safe house, a bank account with enough money to disappear anywhere in the world, and a new identity complete with documentation. Your freedom, if you want it." Emma stared at the key, the weight of choice heavier than the small metal object in her hand. "And if I stay?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze with a directness that acknowledged the complicated reality between them. "Then we rebuild," Nathan answered without hesitation. "The community center first. Larger, better equipped, with programs that reach more children who need safety and opportunity. Then we transition the legitimate businesses, phase out the others gradually to minimize the power vacuum. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing could erase the violence that had brought them to this moment, or the blood that stained Nathan's rise to power. But in his proposal, Emma recognized something revolutionary, not redemption, but evolution, the possibility of creating something better from a foundation built in darkness. 2 weeks later, Emma stood beside Nathan at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new community center, her arm still in a sling but her stance strong as they pushed golden shovels into soil rich with promise. The children from the center surrounded them, their faces bright with hope for a future they could now imagine. Partners, Nathan had called them when she'd handed back the key to freedom, choosing instead to stay and help shape something new from the ashes of his empire. Not captive and captor, not victim and villain, but equals in the complex work of transformation. That night, as they stood on the balcony of the rebuilt penthouse, looking out over the city that had nearly destroyed them both, Nathan took her hand with a gentleness that still surprised her. "I never thought I'd find someone brave enough to see the monster in me and stay anyway." Emma turned to face him, no longer afraid of the intensity in his golden eyes, or the power he commanded. "I see all of you, the darkness and the light, and I choose both, because that's what makes you real." As his lips found hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering, Emma realized that some collisions were meant to change trajectories forever, some accidents designed by fate to create something neither person could have built alone. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is crucial for me to continue creating content here.